Sarah Mitchell had always been the kind of person people gravitated toward, warm, kind, and full of life. She had dreams, a future she was eager to embrace. But one day, without warning, she was gone. At first, no one understood what had happened. Friends sent messages, calls went unanswered, and worry slowly crept in. Some thought she needed space. Others believed she had left town. But those closest to her felt something was deeply wrong, and they were right. The search for answers led to places no one expected. A familiar figure, a trusted name, a man whose life was built on faith and devotion, Father Daniel Hayes. To his congregation, he was more than a priest. He was a guide, a mentor, a symbol of unwavering belief. But behind the church doors, another story was unfolding, one that no one saw coming. What started as a secret grew into something impossible to contain. And when the truth finally came to light, it left an entire community in disbelief. What really happened to Sarah Mitchell? What was Father Hayes so desperate to keep hidden? And how did a story that began with trust and faith take such a shocking turn? Stay with us as we uncover the truth, a story of deception, betrayal, and the devastating cost of silence. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more true crime stories that will leave you speechless. Now, let's begin. At first glance, Father Daniel Hayes was the kind of man people trusted without question. He had spent years devoted to his faith, guiding those who sought wisdom and comfort. He was known for his calm voice, his unwavering commitment to his congregation, and the way he made people feel seen. But not everything was as it appeared. Sarah Mitchell had always been drawn to the church, though not for the same reasons as others. While many came to find peace, she came to escape the noise in her own life. In Father Hayes, she found someone who listened, someone who understood. Their conversation started like any other. She would stay after service, sharing thoughts about faith, life, and the struggles that weighed on her. He offered words of comfort, reassurance, guidance. But over time, the nature of their talks changed. What was once innocent became personal. What had been casual turned into something neither of them could ignore. The glances held longer. The pauses between words stretched, filled with something unspoken. No one in the congregation suspected a thing. After all, who would? A priest and a churchgoer, one a devoted man of God, the other a young woman simply seeking answers. There was nothing unusual about that. Until there was. Their meetings became more frequent, yet more secretive. No longer just in the church, but in places no one would think to look. An empty pew in the late hours of the evening. A dimly lit parking lot. A quiet table in a cafe far from town. At first, it seemed harmless. A connection that felt inevitable, yet manageable. They told themselves it was nothing, that it didn't have to mean more than it was. But that was a lie. And then, the first mistake. Maybe it was the way he brushed against her arm one evening, longer than necessary, or the moment she let her fingers linger on his as she handed him something. Maybe it was when their eyes met for too long and neither of them looked away. What they had sworn would never happen, happened. There were stolen moments, whispers in the dark, messages exchanged when no one was looking, hotels in places where no one would recognize them, excuses made to slip away unnoticed. But secrets like these don't stay hidden forever. While they lived in the illusion of privacy, eyes were watching. Someone had seen something, a glimpse of them together when they shouldn't have been. A whisper here, a rumor there. At first, it was easy to ignore. No proof, just speculation. But speculation had a way of growing. And once it started, it was only a matter of time before everything fell apart. Sarah sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, gripping the small plastic test in her trembling hands. Two bold lines stared back at her, confirming what she had suspected for weeks. A rush of emotions flooded her: excitement, fear, and an overwhelming sense of uncertainty. For a brief moment, she imagined a future filled with warmth, with love, with something real. But that moment passed as quickly as it came. Reality settled in like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just any child. She reached for her phone, her hands unsteady as she typed out a message. The waiting was unbearable, the silence even worse. Hours passed before she finally received a reply. A short response, distant, reluctant. The weight of what was coming pressed against her ribs as she made her way to their meeting place. The church had always been their sanctuary. It was where it all began, where stolen glances turned into something unspoken, where faith was replaced by temptation. But tonight, the walls felt cold. The candlelight cast flickering shadows, stretching across the floor like restless spirits. Father Daniel Hayes arrived, his face strained, his body tense. The air between them was thick with something neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Sarah wasted no time. She met his eyes, searching for something: reassurance, understanding, anything that told her she wasn't in this alone. But the moment he realized why she had called him here, the shift was immediate. The color drained from his face, his lips pressed into a thin line, his hands curling into fists at his sides. He turned away, dragging a hand over his face as though wiping away the reality of what she had just told him. The silence that followed stretched unbearably, an answer in itself. Panic flickered in his eyes. His entire world had been built on a foundation that could not afford cracks, and now it was crumbling beneath him. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She had imagined this moment differently. A confession met with concern, a difficult but necessary conversation about the future. Instead, all she saw in his expression was fear, not for her, not for their child, but for himself. She refused to be pushed aside. Too much had already been sacrificed for this relationship, too many nights spent in secrecy, too many lies told to keep the illusion alive. This was real now. There was no hiding from it. She demanded a choice. No more secrecy. No more stolen moments in the shadows. He could walk away from the priesthood, from the life he had sworn to uphold, and step into something real, or she would take matters into her own hands. The weight of her words settled heavily on him. Every option led to ruin. He had spent years constructing a life that could not withstand a scandal. The whispers had already begun, subtle, barely noticeable, but growing. His absence from evening prayers, the slight shift in his demeanor, the way his mind wandered in the middle of sermons. People were starting to question. The messages from Sarah became relentless. The pressure mounted with each passing day. Calls went unanswered. The weight of deception pressed against him, suffocating. He had convinced himself for so long that he was in control, that he could keep the two sides of his life separate. But now they were colliding, threatening to destroy everything in their wake. At night, the glow of his phone screen haunted him. The notifications never stopped. Each unread message a reminder that this was no longer something he could avoid. Sarah had run out of patience. The messages turned sharper, more urgent. The last one sent a jolt of panic through his chest. His breathing grew shallow, his mind racing. There was no way out. His double life was unraveling. Every path led to disaster. That night, the rain fell hard against the city streets. Inside her apartment, Sarah paced near the window, her heart heavy, but her resolve unwavering. She had made her decision, and there was no turning back. The weight of secrecy had become unbearable. Outside, footsteps echoed in the hallway. A slow, deliberate sound, stopping just beyond her door. Then, silence. The night was cold, the kind that made everything feel still and lifeless. Sarah stood behind the church, her heart pounding as she waited. Tonight, she wasn't going to be ignored. She had given Father Daniel every opportunity to make things right, but all she had received were empty promises. Now, she needed a decision. When he finally arrived, his face was tight with worry. He didn't meet her eyes. His hands fidgeted, his breathing uneven. She wasted no time. She told him she wasn't backing down. He needed to choose. Her, their child, or the life he was desperately trying to hold on to. He pleaded with her, begged her to think of the consequences, the church, his reputation, everything he had built. But Sarah had spent too many nights crying herself to sleep, waiting for him to take responsibility. She was done waiting. She turned to leave. That's when it happened. A sudden grip on her wrist, tight, too tight. She gasped, trying to pull away. He wouldn't let go. His breathing turned shallow, his eyes wild with panic. His world was collapsing, and she was the one holding the match. He needed her to stop, to listen, but she wouldn't. Then, in a moment of desperation, his hands moved from her wrist to her throat. A few seconds of struggle, a choked gasp, then nothing. His grip loosened. She slumped to the ground. The silence was deafening. His mind raced, his body shook. What had he done? He staggered back, staring at her motionless figure. This wasn't supposed to happen, but it had. The next day, Sarah was reported missing. Friends grew concerned when she didn't return their calls. It took 2 days before she was found. Hidden beneath an old storage shelf in the church basement, carefully placed, as if someone wanted to delay her discovery. There were no obvious wounds, just faint bruising around her neck. The experts noted the careful positioning of her body. This wasn't random. This was deliberate. Father Daniel stood before the congregation, his voice steady as he prayed for Sarah's safe return. He spoke of faith, of hope, of divine justice. His hands trembled, but only slightly. He thought he had covered his tracks. He thought no one would suspect him. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. It was a janitor who found her first, unlocking the basement for routine cleaning. The moment he stepped inside, he noticed something was wrong. A faint, unnatural stillness hung in the air. Then he saw her. Panic followed. Within minutes, the police arrived, sealing off the scene. Officers moved quickly, examining the surroundings. There were no signs of forced entry, no immediate evidence of a struggle. But the positioning of the body told a story, one of careful concealment. Whoever placed her there wanted to buy time. Friends and family were questioned first. Had she mentioned feeling threatened? Had she been seeing anyone? It didn't take long for Father Daniel's name to surface. Some described him as a mentor, others as someone she seemed emotionally tied to. The police approached him with caution. He played his role well, shocked, devastated, heartbroken over her passing. He spoke of her kindness, her devotion to faith. He even led a special prayer in her memory. For a while it worked, but cracks began to show. A forensic team combed through the basement. Fibers from Father Daniel's clothing were found near her body. Surveillance footage placed him near the church at a time when he claimed to be elsewhere. Text messages painted a picture of a relationship spiraling out of control. Then, a breakthrough. A witness came forward, an elderly woman who often attended evening prayers. She remembered seeing Sarah and Father Daniel arguing behind the church the night she vanished. Their voices were raised. Sarah looked distressed. Then, just like that, she was gone. The walls were closing in. When questioned, he remained composed. He claimed he had been inside the church, deep in prayer, unaware of Sarah's whereabouts. But detectives weren't convinced. They laid out the evidence, the texts, the fibers, the footage. Each piece chipped away at his story. His hands trembled. His breath quickened. His once calm demeanor cracked under pressure. Justice was on its way. The courtroom was silent, yet the tension was suffocating. Rows of spectators filled the benches, some seeking justice, others struggling to accept the unthinkable truth. At the center of it all sat Father Daniel, once revered, now stripped of his collar and dignity. His face remained emotionless, as the prosecution laid bare the chilling details of Sarah's final moments. The prosecutor wasted no time. Piece by piece, they dismantled the carefully woven web of lies. The messages Sarah had sent, the inconsistencies in his alibi, the forensic evidence, all pointed to a man who had desperately tried to silence the one person who could destroy his facade. The defense fought back. They painted a picture of a man under immense pressure, claiming he acted in a moment of blind panic. Some even whispered the word accident, though the evidence suggested otherwise. Witnesses took the stand. Friends spoke of Sarah's fear in the weeks leading up to her passing. A forensic expert explained the lack of struggle, how the crime was not spontaneous but controlled. Then came the most damning testimony, the woman who had seen them together that night, her voice shaking as she described Sarah's distress. Father Daniel refused to speak. He remained still, staring at the floor, hands folded like a man deep in prayer. But prayers could not save him now. The jury's decision came swiftly. Guilty, a lifetime behind bars. The sentence was read, and a quiet sob broke the silence. Sarah's mother clutching a framed photo of her daughter. Her father, eyes hollow, simply whispered that justice had been served. As reporters dug deeper, unsettling truths surfaced. Had the church known about his relationship with Sarah? Had they turned a blind eye? Some whispered that she wasn't the first, that others had come before her, women who had remained silent out of fear, out of faith. Some church members defended him, insisting he had been framed, that the devil himself was at work. Others quietly stepped away, their faith shaken, unsure what to believe anymore. The church stood empty. Rows of wooden pews bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. A single flame flickered at the altar, casting long shadows against the walls. The man who once stood here, preaching forgiveness, now sat alone in a prison cell, condemned by his own sins. Imagine Sarah was someone you knew, a person you cared about, maybe a friend, a sister, or a daughter. And then, one day, you discovered the truth. She had been betrayed by the very person she trusted the most. What would you do? Would you stand by Father Daniel, hoping there was another side to the story? Or would you fight for Sarah, seeking justice no matter how painful it was? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories that make you question everything.